Welcome to the Peaceful Worldschooling podcast, featuring your host, ajharders. We're committed to cultivating a peaceful world beginning right in our own hearts and homes. Together, we believe that the world is our biggest and best classroom, and the people and places in it are our greatest teachers. So I invite you to join me on the adventure of a lifetime, beginning with a conversation that can change the world. Today's episode of the Peaceful Worldschooling podcast was recorded in November 2021. Since then, Shanna Rathbone has been diagnosed with a grade 1 meningioma brain tumor. She's also undergone brain surgery in order to remove the tumor and has been experiencing several complications post-surgery, including multiple types of seizures on a regular basis. Shanna's also suffered nerve damage that is affecting her ability to walk. In order to help support Shanna, I created a Give, Send, Go campaign where you can donate directly to help her and her family as they navigate these extremely difficult circumstances. Please check out the link in the description so that you can give directly to her. Thank you in advance for your generosity. Hello, and welcome to today's episode of the Peaceful Worldschooling podcast, where we are committed to cultivating a peaceful world beginning right in our own hearts and homes. My name is ajharders, and I'm a special education teacher, the author of Gospel-Based Parenting and the Crunchy Kids series, and a proud worldschooling mother to two amazing friends, Sophia, who's 7, and Benjamin, who is 3. Today on the Peaceful Worldschooling podcast, I have the privilege and honor of introducing you to Shanna Rathbone. Thank you so very much for joining us as we have a conversation that can change the world. Thank you for joining me, Shanna.
Thank you for having me.
It is my pleasure. And actually, Shanna, I'm really excited to have this conversation with Shanna today because not only are we both local, we're both here in Maryland, but we also have our children in the same homeschool co-op group, which actually is a self-directed learning center. And we can talk about that later in the episode. But to get us started, can you just share a little bit about who you are, your family, and a little bit about your story?
Sure. So yes, as Angela mentioned, my name is Shanna Rathbone. I am a homeschooling mom of 2, Arabella, who is 13, and Brayden is 8. Make sure I get that right. But I didn't start out as a homeschooler. My daughter went to a typical school. She actually started out in a cooperative preschool, which is really a lot like homeschooling because they do a lot of organic style learning. They're outside a lot. They learn by doing, not, worksheet after worksheet and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And she went there for 2 years, and I really enjoyed how that was set up and how the parents could be like fully involved. Like we could come and spend all day in the classroom if we wanted.
Oh, wow.
Which really helped me after my mom passed away 10 years ago, because at that point, I kind of clung to the kids, like they just kind of lifted me up. Yeah. So for like several weeks, I just spent the whole day in the classroom. And it really helped during that grief period, but that's another story. But so when my daughter started going to public school for kindergarten, it was kind of a shock for me as a parent coming from a preschool that was so involved into the public school system where parents are kind of shut out. Like, yeah. Unless you get picked to go on a field trip or you somehow win the lottery and get to be the room mom, you really don't know anything that's going on except for the hundreds of, letters that are being sent home all the time.
Yeah. And even those letters, they're really generic too, like they don't really give a parent a good idea of what's happening behind the closed doors of that classroom.
Correct. Yeah. And that was really hard for me because I felt like I didn't know what she was learning. But I really liked her kindergarten teacher. She was really sweet. And, actually for kindergarten, I did get lucky to be able to be the room mom. But once she got into first grade, things kind of changed because, there was some bullying issues going on in the school, on her bus specifically, stuff that I had heard that had been going on for a couple years prior. It was two brothers, and in first grade, it hit my daughter.
Oh,
I
wow.
could tell something was wrong because at the time I had an infant. My son was just born, and my daughter would purposely try to miss the bus because she didn't want to ride the bus. She wanted me to take her to school, and it was really inconvenient when you have an infant. So
Yeah.
finally I started talking to some of the parents, and they were telling me that their kid, the parents at our bus stop, they were telling me that their child was telling them that Bella was being bullied on the bus by these boys.
Oh, wow.
But my daughter wouldn't tell me anything. She was always kind of like, it's okay. No. And so I went to the principal and I said, I want to have a discussion about this. Like, I want to see the recordings of the bus. And she's like, we could get the recordings, but there's no video. I mean, there's no audio. And I'm like, okay. And I told her how, I'm told that it's these specific kids, and I've been told that they're, they have a history of bullying. And she's like, yeah, we know about them. And I said, well, at what point do these kids lose their privilege of riding the bus?
Mm-hmm.
And she said, well, we really don't like to do that because it's a big inconvenience for the parents. And I sat back and said, so it's not a big inconvenience to the parents of the child that's being bullied?
Wow.
When we have to drive our kid to school every day because they're scared to ride the bus?
Yeah.
So at that point, well, then I found out a couple weeks later that the principal was apparently good friends with the grandparents of these two boys. And that really, it rubbed me the wrong way because I'm like, friends or not, you still have a job to do.
Yeah.
And kids to protect. So
Yeah.
I wanted to pull my daughter at that point because I didn't want her to be in a school that was run like that. But my husband was against it. He was kind of, jaded, the old school homeschooling. He's like, I grew up with a couple and they were just weird. And I'm like, that was 35 years ago. There's so many opportunities now for homeschoolers. Like, it's different.
Yeah.
But I held off. And then when she got to third grade, that's when they start changing classrooms and when they start doing the standardized testing. And I started noticing that she was really irritable. Like, she wasn't cooperative at home like she used to be. And then they called me in for a conference, and they said, no, we're not going to sugarcoat it. We're concerned Bella's reading on a first grade level right now. And I said, well, how's that possible? Because she was like above reading level at the end of second grade.
Yeah.
And I put her in the summer reading program every year. She reads out loud to us. Like, what is she struggling with? Maybe I can help her at home. And her teacher couldn't give me any answers. She was just like, well, this is based on our assessments and I could recommend a tutor. And I said, I don't want to have to pay for a tutor. I want to be able to know what she's struggling with.
Yeah.
And you can't tell me that. And so it was at that point when I realized I had mixed feelings. There was part of me that was angry, but then there was also part of me that kind of felt bad for the teacher because I was like, wow, you guys have so much put on you that you don't even know where individual children are struggling.
Yeah.
So I called my husband on the way home and I said, listen, I know you don't agree with it, but I'm pulling her.
Wow.
I mean, it's clear that I can do a better job at giving her the attention that she needs at home than what she's getting at school because the teacher doesn't even know where she's struggling.
Yeah.
So I pulled her it was mid third grade, right before Thanksgiving break. And she just never went back after Thanksgiving. And it's been a game changer, honestly, because I was petrified at first because I didn't think that I could teach my kid. Like, I'm not a teacher. But I remember this one woman that I met when I was actually in line to vote, struck up a conversation with this grandmother. Her older grandchildren were there, and I guess they homeschooled, or no, maybe they were off. I think they were off that day anyway, because I had my kids with me. And she was talking about how she homeschools her grandchildren. I was like, oh yeah, I wanted to homeschool. I said, but I don't know if I'm, qualified, if I could do it, or if she'd respect me as a teacher. And one thing she said, she's like, you don't need any special qualifications to homeschool your kids. The only thing you need is to know that you have their best interest at heart and you love them through it all.
Wow.
Like that was the one thing. And it kind of stood out to me. Like, I don't need to be a teacher. Like, I mean, I've guided these children from the moment they were born to learn how to eat, dress, talk. Like, why can't I guide them through this? You know, there's so many resources these days that, you know, why do I have to have a special certification?
Right.
So I pulled her, and we had signed up for a curriculum, and then I kind of backed out of that because I did it in like halfway through the year. I had no clue where she was at, like where to start. So I just started testing her back to back to back, like doing these assessments, and we were both miserable. And I reached out to one of the homeschool Facebook groups that I'm in, and it was the parents in there that really kind of put me on the path I am now, because they said, you know, stop schooling at all. Like, put everything away and don't do anything. Just let her be a kid and pay attention to how she learns best. Because the more you're pushing stuff on her, the harder it's going to be. And so, and
very good advice.
Yeah. They also told me to look up unschooling. I'm sorry, deschooling.
Yes.
To get me out of that mindset of what she should be doing. Because, you know, once you're in the public school system, you do kind of get into this, oh, they need to be on at this pace, you know?
Right.
And if they're not, then they're not doing well.
Yeah. For people that aren't familiar with that term deschooling, can you explain a little bit about what that means and what that deschooling process looked like for you?
Deschooling is basically getting out of your head. The way I kind of look at it as, you know, when you're in public school, you have this, it's ingrained in you that, you know, in first grade, they should be learning this, second grade, they should be learning this, third grade, they should be learning this, and all these different steps. And then, oh, well, they need to be getting this grade, and, you know, or they're not smart, or they need to be reading by this age, like all these different expectations that have been put on us. Deschooling kind of teaches you that that's not what we shouldn't be holding our kids to this standard. Like, they're kids, they all learn at different paces in their own individual way. You know, that there was, I watched a documentary once. It wasn't a documentary, it was like a short blurb about how so much of in society has evolved to fit society. Like, our cars suit us better these days than they did in the 50s, you know, but the one thing that hasn't changed is our education. Like, you sit at the desk in the class, all facing one way. The teacher teaches the same thing to everybody, and you're expected to just keep up with it. Well, it's inevitable that there's going to be kids that don't learn that way. They need to learn differently. So deschooling kind of takes you back to realizing that your kid is unique in how they need to learn. And it's our job to kind of honor that and provide the tools for them to learn in the way that best suits them. Yeah. So I was kind of scared. I was really scared. I put everything away, and she's always been very creative, but her creativity kind of went through the roof for 2 months. Like, we did nothing until after the first of the year, because she had no less than 4 different projects going on around the house at one time. Sometimes my husband would come home and be like, what is this? And I'm like, don't touch it. Leave it there. It's her thing. Leave it there. But, you know, she needed to get that out because, like, as I said, like, she was always very creative. And when she started in public school, that creative part of her brain got like stifled. I mean, there was one time in first grade that her parent or her teacher called me in for a conference, and she said that, you know, she had to turn Bella's desk completely around, because when she would be explaining something to other kids, Bella would start pulling crayons and stuff out of her desk and start drawing. And while, I mean, I could understand from the teacher's perspective that may have been a distraction, in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, well, it's clearly something she already knows. So she's trying to keep her mind occupied.
Yeah.
And her creativity is how she does that.
Yeah.
So she was doing something that she needed to do. But
it's interesting that you talk about like her creativity and how that was stifled in the schooling environment. And I definitely can say that I wish that that was the exception to the rule, but it's really not. And when I was teaching at an elementary school in Prince George's County, one of the counties close by where we live, the kids in that school, in that elementary school, they only had art class twice a year for half an hour. That was it. Art
wow.
class twice a year. And it just blew my mind, because we think about, you know, children and how much art and creative expression, like how important that is to little kids in particular, that just, they love to paint and draw and create and make things and sculpt, and like, and then to only have that opportunity twice a year for 30 minutes is just crazy to me.
Yeah.
But what an, I mean, and that is so telling too, that when your daughter was free from those schooling expectations, the first thing that she kind of dove into was that creative expression, and like really investing her time and energy in art and expressing herself through art. That's really incredible.
Yeah. And I mean, it goes back to, you know, even in like childhood therapy,
Yeah.
therapists will use art to get kids to express their feelings, to get it out. So it's being creative, you can also be very healing. So it kind of, you know, I kind of started putting it together, like it's no wonder she was so stressed and combative and non-cooperative at home whenever she was feeling a certain way and she had no way to get it out. Because of course, when she came home, she had to do homework. And if we had, you know, she was at the time, she was, you know, doing different extracurricular activities. So it was always, okay, hurry up, do your homework, grab something to eat, let's go, we got to get to practice. And then it's get home, get it back, get ready for school the next day. Like it was this constant rush, 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 rush. And that being placed on young children, I feel like now looking back, like I feel sorry that I did that to her for 3 years, you know, because now she's so much more relaxed. She's I don't know, she's just blossomed so much because she thinks for herself. She talks about ideas, like she has like adult conversations, like she gets curious about real things. And sometimes when I see her perspective on things, I'm like, wow, you're only 13 and you look at it that way. Like,
Yeah, our kids are brilliant.
Yeah. And so I don't know, everyone kept asking me, they're like, you know, were you ever going to put her back in school? And I'm like, you know, we're going to take it year by year. As long as she still likes homeschooling, we'll keep doing it.
Yeah.
You know, I was nervous because, you know, they said, you know, they miss out on so much in high school prom and all that kind of stuff. But nowadays with the co-ops and the different organizations for homeschoolers, like they fill all that in, you know, they don't miss out on anything.
Yeah, they really don't.
Yeah, if anything, they get more. But, you know, it was there was a very different experience between starting to homeschool my daughter, who had, you know, the first 3 years of public school, versus starting with my son, because, you know, he's never went to public school.
Oh, wow.
There's 5 years difference from them. So I was already homeschooling my daughter by the time he was getting of age. He did still go to the same cooperative preschool that she went to, because we loved that preschool. So, but I knew I wanted to homeschool, but I was of course scared, because I'm like, how am I going to teach my son to read? How am I going to do all that stuff? And then we had joined an umbrella group, because I stopped reviewing with the county, because they make it so much more stressful on me as a parent. Like, I think my anxiety was just through the roof. Like, I never felt like I was enough, like I was doing enough, I was good enough. Like, oh my gosh, are they going to tell me I can't homeschool my kid anymore because I don't have enough stuff?
Yeah.
So I started reviewing with the county, because we do more of an eclectic style homeschooling. It was much more relaxed that way, because the umbrella group leaders, like they understand, they get it, they homeschool their own kids. And so whenever we first joined an umbrella group, the director of that, she made a comment at the meeting. She said, most kids by the time they're 8 years old, whether they have formal instruction or no instruction, will teach themselves how to read because they're naturally curious. And it kind of like potty training, if you try to push it too early, the kid's going to kick back, you're going to struggle, it's going to be this big headache, and it's going to be a miserable experience. Sure, they'll eventually get it. But if you just wait until the child shows you that they are ready to potty train, it goes so much easier and so much faster. And so she basically said, don't push it. Don't push it too soon. Like, they'll pay attention to them and they will show you when they're ready. So I kind of, at the time my son hadn't started kindergarten. He was about to start kindergarten, but I was like, I wonder if that's actually true. And then when we started kindergarten, when I started kind of introducing certain things, I noticed he had zero interest in letters, words, sounding things out. And is that? I'm sorry.
No worries.
But he had zero interest in learning to read or sound things out or even writing letters. And I was kind of nervous at first, but he really enjoyed math and science and that kind of stuff. So I just kind of held in the back of my head what she said. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to trust her. She's done this with her own kids. She runs an umbrella group. I'm sure she has to know what she's talking about, right?
Yeah.
So I let it go. And we focused on the stuff that he was interested in. And it went okay. And then I remember thinking, please don't let any of my friends start asking him to like read something, because then I'm going to be like judged because my homeschooling kindergartner can't read. Like, that kind of paranoia because, of everybody else's expectations.
Right. Yeah.
And so, but I was like, you know what? This is our journey and we're going to do it our way. They don't understand it. They don't need to understand it. I just need to understand it and be comfortable with it. So same thing through first grade. And then it was during the summer between first and second grade. It was when we had the shutdown and everything.
Yeah.
He suddenly started asking questions and looking at signs and looking at words and saying, what does that say? What does that sound? What sound does that make? And so I kind of was like, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to do this now. Okay. So I just kind of went with it and got, I was excited to teach him stuff, and he picked it up like that. Like,
oh, wow.
He just, it got to the point that my husband would say something, read something, and my husband would look at me like, how did he know what that said? And I'm like, I don't know, but he's getting it. Like, he understands it. And
oh, that's amazing.
Yeah. And now in some ways, he almost can read things better than my 13-year-old because I think it was pushed on her too early. There were things that she missed. So there's still some things that she struggles with sometimes. I don't know if that's something that will just kind of iron itself out. I'm not really sure, but it's amazing to see how different it can be when you just let the child show you when they're ready to learn something and you run with it then, versus trying to push it all together because of a specific grade and expectations of what they're supposed to be learning.
Yeah. Well, and when we wait until our children are expressing interest in these different things, they learn it so much faster. Like, I find that when my daughter's the one that's asking the questions or wanting to learn about a particular topic, we don't have to spend, an hour or days or weeks trying to learn a particular math topic or something like that, because she's the one that's initiating it. And so they just get it like that. And we can, move on, and there's so much less stress and headache and fighting and bickering, and like we can just relax and go with the flow. And as stuff comes up in their real life, then we address it in real life, in real time. And
Yeah. Yeah. And that's kind of how we've done most things. I mean, we still use curriculum for like language arts and math. So they're still like learning, but if they're kind of like acting like they're kind of burnout or they're just need a break, then we take a break. And then they go back to it. But most other things, when it comes to like social studies and science and things like that, like it's more of like life learning, like as things come up, or I might bring something up, like say it's like a certain season, and you want to learn, obviously you want to kind of use that season to learn about a topic that pertains to that season, then but if they have no interest, then okay, maybe next year they'll have the interest. But it's made it so much more relaxed rather than pushing things. Because I mean, I had a friend who she started homeschooling a couple months after I did. She also pulled her daughter out, but she put her in this very strict, basically school at home curriculum. And her daughter hated it.
Oh, wow.
Like she only did it for like 3 months and she put her back in school because she's like, I can't do this. It's a constant battle. And I'm like, I didn't want to say you're doing it wrong, but like, because I think everybody's journey is their own, but
well,
I really believe
that's why that deschooling process, I think, is so important, because when you take a child out of this super structured environment where someone else is telling them what they have to learn all day, every day, like every moment of their life is planned, and then you take them into a homeschooling environment, when you try to kind of duplicate that or do school at home, it never really works out well. Like kids just, they're not meant to learn like that. And then especially when you factor in that, the parent-child relationship there too, it just causes so much strife between parents and children. I mean, even parents just having to deal with the homework aspect of their kids learning. Parents fight with their kids all the time about, did you do your homework yet? You got to do your homework now, stop playing games, go do your homework. I mean, it's this constant struggle over school, and it's a struggle that doesn't need to be there.
Because I think there's a different dynamic that I noticed, because I know when I first started homeschooling, I was afraid that I couldn't teach my daughter.
Yeah.
But then looking back on it, I was never meant to teach my daughter. Like kids look at teachers as like authoritarian type of a figure, like telling them instructing them, telling them what they do. They don't look at their parents like that. They look at parents as, this is my comfort, this is my safe space, this is, and so we kind of have to approach it differently. Whereas instead of teaching our children, I look at now as, I'm just a coach. I'm like standing on the sidelines. I will help them and provide ways for them to get information, whether it be looking up documentaries, Googling something, providing a curriculum that they can use, providing workbooks or anything that they want to use to like look at resources and stuff.
Yeah.
And then they kind of take the reins. And then when they need help or when they're struggling, it's kind of like they can be like, hey, and then I'll kind of step in and be like, okay, like how can we figure this out?
Yeah. Like, I think that's a great way to say it, like using the term of a coach or the image of a coach. One of the ways I like to explain it is that as parents, we have two choices. We can either have power over our children, or we can empower our children to do the things that they love and that they want in the world. And when we have power over them and that like authoritarian structure, it really does. It creates conflict. Just the dynamics of that relationship creates conflict. But when we can have that kind of coaching mentality where I'm not here to have power over you, but I'm here to empower you in the things that you're pursuing in your life. If you need help, if you need strategies, if you need resources, if you need support, like that's what I'm here for. But I'm not here to take, power and control over you. Like you are a unique individual with your own, passions, talents, and gifts and all that. And I'm here to support you in those things, in your own life path.
It's the same kind of concept of, when kids are, when they're growing up, how they start to want to explore their independence.
Yeah.
and they start wanting to assert their independence, and they become like, the whole no, like they want to, I do it myself. Like they want that independence. So if we can, give them that independence with, obviously some boundaries, you're not just going to be like, oh, do whatever you want. Like,
yeah.
but if we go about it where we're constantly just telling, we're going to keep that power struggle going that we had when they were toddlers.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
it works better when you can kind of take away that instruction type of mentality and replace it with just support. So that they're kind of feeling more in charge, like they have the choice of how fast they want to go. Like, just this year, my daughter realized that, a lot of her friends are looking at what high schools they want to go to. So they're researching high schools. And she came to me a few weeks ago. She's like, Mom, I don't think I want to go to high school. And I said, okay. And she said, it's funny though, because most of my friends are researching high schools, but I can research colleges. Because she learned that, I think it's at 13, you can start to CLEP out of classes.
Mm-hmm.
And she has the option to start college early and do like dual enrollment and things like that. Like she has opportunities as a homeschooler where she can actually graduate early and have part of her college done.
Yeah.
If she applies herself, if she does the work and, sets herself up for success, then she can go beyond what her public school friends are doing.
Yeah. And a lot of those college classes, she can actually take them not just at a discount, but a lot of them are free for homeschoolers, which is another really great incentive, I think. But that is really cool, as her friends are exploring what the high school they're going to, that she's recognizing that she can already be thinking and planning about what college she wants to go to, or what kinds of steps she will need to take now to prepare herself to be where she wants to be for the future.
Yeah, because she said for the last I'm gonna say maybe 2 years that she wants to be an architect. Oh, okay. And I kind of, I take it with a grain of salt. Like that may change. I mean, I know when I was that age, I had an idea of what I wanted to be, but that's totally not what I want to be now. But, I entertain it. I'm like, okay, well, you really got to hone in on the math and the science if you want to be an architect. Yeah. And so she knew that, like, my husband went to Catholic University down in DC, and he had some of his good friends were in their accelerated master's program for architecture, where they went to school for 5 years and they had their master's in architecture. So she didn't want to go to the college that Dad went to. But so she's been researching, like Googling what colleges have accelerated master's programs for architecture. And then even in the curriculum that we're with Acellus Academy. Well, actually, we're doing their unaccredited version, which is called Power Homeschool. But she was looking through there and she's like, Mom, they have an engineering class. Can I take it? And I was like, sure, why not? So like she's taking their engineering class, at 13, just because she wants to, get a taste for what that's about. And then she also likes to look at classes on outschool.com, which has a lot of great architecture and engineering type themed classes. So, now that she knows that she's holding the reins, she has the motivation to do more, versus being pushed and told, and, well, you have to get this grade. Like, I've never talked anything to her about grades, because in our old curriculum, they didn't actually score things on grades. It was like percentages. So I always told her, I'm like, as long as you get an 80% or more on these quizzes, then you can move forward. If you get below that, I want you to retake the lesson because you missed something. Yeah. I want to make sure that you understand it enough to move forward. Yeah. And, but now that we switched to the Acellus program, she likes looking at the GPA, and she likes to challenge herself to see if she can get that GPA higher. So it's been like this personal challenge of hers,
Mhm.
just because she knows that she has the ability to, like, there's no ceiling. The sky's the limit for her. She could graduate early. She could do all the things she wants if she applies herself. And,
Mhm.
no one's telling her she has to do it.
Yeah. That's awesome. I'm really glad to hear like how her homeschooling, I guess, has evolved over the years.
Mhm.
But I kind of want to go back in time a little bit to when she first, transitioned. Um, I'm wondering what was that transition period like for her? I mean, we talked about, going through that process of deschooling, but what was it like for her to go from a schooling environment into that deschooling environment for however long you did that?
When I look back, the only thing that I can see is relief.
Mm,
Like, I feel like there was just this weight lifted off of her, like this pressure lifted,
yeah.
because like when she was in school, when we would struggle with, the battle, the homework battle and stuff, and you got to do this. Come on, Bella. Like, um, she would say things like, I'm not good at this. Like,
Mm,
I'm not good as such and such. And I'm like, it doesn't matter what such and such is doing. So there was always that comparison of what I'm capable of versus what this other person in my class is capable of. And they're doing more than me, so I must not be good. Like,
mm,
there was just always this negative self-talk when she was in public school because she was comparing herself.
yeah.
But once we started homeschooling, once we did the deschooling and she took that time to just be a kid,
Yeah.
and we started learning in like unique ways. Like, like that Christmas, she wanted to make Christmas ornaments for her friends using popsicle sticks. And
Mm,
so we kind of combined it with math, because she knew she needed a certain amount. And I mean, of course, at that time it was very, very basic stuff because she was only in third grade. But um, she liked doing that. She liked learning in that way without that comparison of what somebody else was doing.
mhm,
And as the months went by, I started noticing her confidence was getting better, and she was wanting to do like extra lessons.
mm,
And I could just tell that it was kind of like this pressure had been relieved.
mhm.
When you leaving?
Is
Sorry.
Dad dropping me off at Toes?
Yes.
Okay, because I told it to Dad and he was confused.
But it kind of went from a place of being under like a constant state of stress to realizing that she could do things and that she could learn in peace.
Mm,
That's what it felt like to me.
wow. That I think that's a beautiful way to describe it, like being able to learn in peace. Like I truly believe that homeschooling has been one of the greatest ways to restore peace in our home. And just being able to have that peace and relax a little bit and breathe and not feel, because just as much as our kids feel that force and that compulsion in school, I feel like parents, we also feel that too. Like I have to force my child to do their homework. I have to force my child to get good grades. I have, like we feel a lot of that pressure as parents. Like we internalize a lot of what it means. Like I want my child to be on the honor roll. I want my child to be the one that's getting good grades or whatever.
Yeah, it's like it becomes like almost like a competition. The whole the
That comparison that you were mentioning, like compare,
yeah.
like they compare, them to their classmates, but we as parents, like we also compare, like our kids to our friends' kids or who's, getting
Yeah,
better grades or whatever.
sharing the report cards and stuff like that on their on their
Yeah.
social media and stuff, so everyone can be like, oh, congratulations. Like, it's like a double, I don't know, it's a competition that just doesn't need to happen. I mean,
You're right. And I heard this quote. I don't remember who it is. I'll have to look it up, but they said comparison is the thief of joy.
heap of joy.
And
Yep.
and it's so true. I feel like maybe John Piper said that. I can't remember, but it is we really do, and it robs us of the joy of who that unique person is, who our child is as a whole human being, like that's not missing or lacking anything, you know?
Because
go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, even how like the child being compared to another child in the classroom, the same thing happens to parents. You know, you have the one parent who, okay, great, your child is getting honor roll, your child's getting straight A's, they make the principal's list or whatever it's called. And they're sharing it, but then, you know, they have friends who maybe have a child who is struggling. So by them sharing how great their child is doing, it will almost put the other person in a state of mind of, you know, I'm not doing enough because my child is struggling and they're not, you know, doing as good. So it's kind of like this double, I don't know, it's like a double hit in a sense, you know?
I was thinking like a double punch, you know?
Yeah, like, exactly.
Yeah. And I mean, we talked about your daughter's process going through that deschooling and how she did her creative expression and was kind of going through it almost like that, decompressing a little bit from a lot of the trauma I feel like that kids experience from being in a schooled environment. I'm wondering, what was the deschooling process like for you as a mom? Because deschooling isn't just for our kids, you know, like you mentioned, it's that unlearning of everything that we thought or believed about what schooling is or what learning should look like. So what was the deschooling process like for you?
I would say it was probably a lot longer for me. Just for that the very aspect of, you know, people are always asking, oh, what are you learning? What are you learning in homeschool? So that is that constant pressure of they're going to judge me as a parent because I'm not teaching my child a specific thing right now. Like, whereas for her, like once she kind of got over that, she felt free, you know, but it took me, I'd say a couple years, honestly, before I truly felt confident in how we homeschooled. And I could stand up and say, this is how we homeschool. I love you. Sorry, she's leaving to go to practice.
No worries.
But, you know, to truly feel that confidence of, you know, this is how we homeschool and it doesn't have to look like what you expect it to look like.
Yeah.
You know? It has to be what works for us.
Right. And I'm glad that you brought that up, that for our children, that process, the deschooling process really is a lot shorter than for us as parents. And I often tell people, you know, when I'm coaching people through homeschooling, I often tell them that during the deschooling process, you want to deschool 1 month for every year that your child has been in school or that you have been in school. So for, you know, for your daughter, that deschooling process for her would have been, you know, let's say like 3 or 4 years, maybe depending on if she went to pre-K or not. But, you know, for someone like you that you're, you know, educated, or me, I have a master's degree, it's going to take me at least 2 years, you know, of deschooling to really start to unpack and unravel a lot of those preconceived ideas and those beliefs that we have about what schooling is. And then of course I'm a teacher, so I'm like, I've got all these extra years, you know, in the classroom that I have to unlearn a lot of those things too. So it takes a lot of time. So if your child has gone through that deschooling process, you know, as a parent, please don't feel like, you know, you're doing something wrong or anything like that. It is going to take us longer to learn the decades worth of indoctrination that we have experienced being in schooled environments. So
because I mean, most all of us have gone to a public school or even a private school. They're still kind of set up the same way,
right? You
know, for our entire lives, and then you also have college on top of that. So our time frame of being able to kind of get out of that mindset and get out of our own heads and just let go it's naturally going to be a lot longer. But I felt that the biggest thing that got me through is understanding that my homeschool journey does not have to look like anybody else's homeschool journey. I mean, you have people who set up like full-on classrooms in their house, like with everything on the walls and everything, like they're in a school.
Yeah.
And then you have other people who, you know, they might have their laptop on the couch. Like that's kind of how we did it. I mean, now I kind of have to do stuff. I do have to separate because, you know, my daughter has her own and my son has his, so they have to be in separate areas, so they're not hearing each other's stuff.
Uh-huh.
But they, most of the time they're in their PJs. We don't have a strict time that they wake up, because I personally feel that they learn better and they're more cooperative when they're rested. So we wake up, they get breakfast, they get stuff done, and we go do what we have to do. And if they don't get stuff done, they can do it later in the evening, or they can do it on the weekend.
Yeah.
It's just such a more relaxed way of learning. And I think it's just more conducive, not only to their learning style, but also to their mental health.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're getting, they're not, exhausted. Whereas today, I don't know how some kids do it with getting up and going to school, coming home, doing homework, doing extracurricular activities. It makes me exhausted thinking about how much stuff some of these kids are doing.
Yeah.
But
and there's a lot of, I heard someone say once that boredom is the birthplace of beauty. We really create incredible things when we have the time and the space to be bored, that we have nothing is planned and there's nothing going on. That when you can sit with that boredom or that feeling of okay, no one else is telling me what to do, that's when we create oh, what do I want to do with this time that I have?
yes.
And so many kids today are being robbed of that gift of time and boredom, and they're missing out on opportunities to create something that they love.
Yeah, and use their imagination, especially in the younger ages, because a lot of times these days, kids are so inundated with technology, whether it be the computer, the TV, the tablets, the phones, whatever.
Yeah.
And they don't really get that chance to be bored and learn where their mind wanders or the creativity. And we've actually been really blessed, because when we moved into this community in December, there's another family that homeschools, and they have 3 girls, and or they have 4 girls, but one's only 2. But so a lot of times, if Braden wants to, he'll go knock on their door in the middle of the day or middle of the afternoon, give them each family time to get some, if they have work that they're doing, to get it done. But
yeah,
and they'll come over and they'll be playing in the woods, and they're their little imaginations are just crazy. When I walk in, I'm like, what are you guys doing? And they're like, oh, we're making white chocolate. And I said, you're doing what? And here they were they were finding, is it walnuts? Yes, it was walnuts. And they're cracking them open. And when they crack them open, the inside is white. So it looks like white chocolate. So they chop it up, and they're pretending. So they pretend like they had this kitchen, and they're doing this stuff, and they made moss beds under our deck, where they dug up moss from a different place and moved it over under the deck and planted it, so they each had their own little spot where they would they'd pretend that they were napping, and just I don't know, it was just neat to see how their minds are. I don't know, it's fun because they were bored.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's beautiful. I definitely think that more kids should have that opportunity, to be bored, and to explore those, their own creativity, like you mentioned, and invent things and use their imaginations in new ways. And
and with Bella, I think it's kind of, with her, it's kind of taken her down a different route than a lot of the public school kids are, when it comes to technology, because she wanted an iPod a couple years ago because she wanted to listen to music. So we bought her an iPod, and my mother-in-law bought her the iPod, but I didn't know, back when I used an iPod, it was for music.
Yeah.
And then when we got it and we were setting it up, and my husband said something about, oh, you can call such and such. And I'm like, wait, she can what? That thing makes phone calls? And that I was like, oh my gosh, because we didn't want her to have a phone that young. And so I wasn't aware of that. But it was a gift. So I'm like, okay, well, there's going to be some rules. Like, we'll see how this goes, but there's going to be some rules. And she did really well with it. And then, so we eventually did go ahead and get her a cell phone, just because since she does all-star cheer, whenever we go to competitions, we are separated from them. And there's typically isn't Wi-Fi in there, that's the only way she could call if she was on the iPod.
Yeah.
And so she would really have no way to communicate with us if she was hungry or if she needed anything while we were at the competition. So
yeah,
based on how she did with the iPod, with the texting and calling, we're like, okay, well, she seems to be handling that good, so we'll go ahead and get her a phone. And I was really nervous about the whole thing with, all the different apps and, Snapchat and what is it? I don't know, the new one.
TikTok?
Yes, that one. All these different ones, like afraid how that would be. Didn't know how like strict I needed to be on that. But because I don't want to say because she's homeschooled, but I feel like she's just developed so much more of a mature mindset on things that she doesn't even care about that stuff, about having that stuff. Like, she has Pinterest, and that's like her favorite thing, because she goes on and she explores ideas of things that she wants to make, and learns how to do different things. Like, that's her favorite social media app. And it just it really makes me thankful that she kind of has that maturity where she doesn't feel the need that she has to fit in with everybody because they have these apps and they're doing TikToks and Snapchat, sending snaps and whatever the term is. But I don't know. Maybe that has to do with homeschooling. Maybe it's just her personality. I don't know, but
probably a combination of both, I would say.
Yeah.
I am wondering though too, a lot of people when they think about homeschooling or homeschoolers in general, I feel like they kind of have that view that your husband have of like, they're kind of weird. Most people, their big hang up is like, oh my gosh, you're homeschooling. How are they going to socialize? People have this weird fear that if you homeschool your kids, they're not going to socialize. They're not going to be able to make friends. And I'm wondering, what has that experience been like for you and for your children? Have you found that it has been difficult to socialize or to be able to make friends as a homeschooling family?
Difficult? Not at all.
Huh.
And I think, honestly, it comes down to the personality of the child, whether you're homeschooled or not. I mean, I know some public school kids who are very awkward and hard to kind of communicate with and get to know. And I think it just, if a child is an anxious child or just is naturally kind of apprehensive, I think it's going to be the same whether they're homeschooled or it could be like that whether they're homeschooled or they're in public school. Whereas if a child is naturally friendly or sometimes even if they're not sociable in public school, and you think, oh my gosh, well, they're not even social now, like they're never going to make it as a homeschooler, it could actually turn out to be the opposite, because maybe they're not social as a public schooler because they're so full of anxiety, or maybe they've been bullied or something like that, so they've kind of gone inward and they've sheltered themselves away. Whereas once they become a homeschooler and they realize that the comparisons are gone, the bullying isn't going to happen like that, because you're not in that type of public school environment where bullying is so prevalent. Like, they kind of open up more and realize that they can find somebody that they want to be friends with, for me, for my kids, both my kids have always been very social, friendly. Braden, I mean, he's kind of friendly to the point that it's scary, because he'll make friends with the UPS driver, and oh, there's my friend, and I'm like, you have no idea who that is. He's my friend. I'm like, okay. But and it kind of is scary because he has no fear of talking to me. He'll walk up to anyone and be like, hi, I'm Braden. Bella, as she's gotten a little bit older, she's kind of shy at first. But the moment she gets she doesn't want to make the initial introduction, but the moment she's introduced, then it's like, oh, okay, cool. Let's go hang. Like, I mean, that's what, when we first came to co-op, she was kind of like that. Whereas Braden just kind of like went running and was like, hey, everybody. And, I had mentioned something to Amy. I was like, would you mind just introducing Bella to the other teens? Because if not, she's going to stay right next to me until there's like that ice is broken. Like, this is Bella, this is such and such, go off. But so yeah, she just did the introduction, and then Bella's been fine ever since. So
yeah. And for those who are not familiar with the term co-op, a lot of homeschoolers participate in co-ops as a way for them to make friends and build relationships with other people. A lot of co-ops have like formal classes and sometimes can even be very similar to a schooling environment, just with a group of homeschoolers. But of course, a lot of times they'll have more choice, and they can choose kind of the classes that they want to participate in. But Shanna and I actually both get to go to a really incredible co-op that is called Traditional Learning Community, and we call it TLC. So that is located in Catonsville, Maryland. In case anyone is close by and interested in checking that out as an option, I will make sure that I include the links in the description for their website. But this is literally like the unschooler's dream. I told Amy's the director. I told Amy that I had really wanted to kind of create an unschool school. Like, that has been my dream and my passion, to one day have an unschool school. Where it can be this space that has all the materials that any kid would need or want to have to be able to learn about whatever they would want to learn about, and then to be able to have that freedom that they could go wherever they want. And little did I know, Amy had already created that for us. So that is a really awesome place. Can you share just a little bit about your experience with the TLC co-op and what that's been like for you and your family?
Well, like I remember actually at the beginning of this year, I just remember like thanking Amy, because it was like a breath of fresh air. Like, that's the only way I could describe it, because it gave that opportunity where kids could be free to play and interact and do different things. Like, it kind of like how I said, how like with homeschooling, you're a coach, you provide the options and then let them choose what they want to do, and you provide the guidance. So at TLC, they provide the options. You have the option of doing art, you have the option of doing music, you have the option of doing like science type stuff, or reading, or computery type stuff, or even like cooking and baking and things like that. You have those options. You don't have to do it, but if that's where your interest lies, you can go for it. And then, they do offer some of the kind of formal, more like regular classes, for kids who want to do things like study a language. Bella's doing both Spanish and French. Because she developed a love for learning other languages a couple of years ago when she decided she wanted to learn Italian, because my husband's family is from Italy. So he still has family in Italy, and Bella's always wanted to go there. So she wanted to learn Italian. So we did it. And because she saw how easy it was for her at this age to kind of pick it up, she was really drawn to taking the French and the Spanish class. And knowing that it's an environment that honors everybody, like, you don't have to be, like, under the current type of environment, like, you don't have to be someone, it's not some place where you have to wear a mask, or you're not allowed to wear a mask. Like, it's, if you want to, you can. If you don't want to, you don't have to. It's not a place that is, you have to have this certain belief system, or you're not accepted, or you have to have this certain belief system, or you're not accepted. Everybody is accepted. And everybody's freedom of choice is accepted and honored and respected. So I think it really kind of hones in on what homeschooling should be, is freedom to choose how you are going to learn. And, I don't know, it's so relaxing to be there, because you're not being judged. about how you teach, about how you live your life. The choices you'll make, you're just accepted.
Yeah. I think that's a beautiful way to describe it. I definitely felt the same. Like for me, it was literally a breath of fresh air.
Yes.
Being able to go there and have this one little corner of the world that just felt like freedom.
Normal.
It felt normal and just felt like complete freedom and joy. And to see all these kids with their big smiling faces that were happy and engaged in learning the things that they were passionate about, and all the different ages that were mixing together and teaching one another and learning from one another. I mean, it was beautiful. Like there's like no other place like it on the planet. So if you are fortunate enough to live in Maryland, I would highly recommend that you check out TLC. It's an awesome place to get connected with. So yeah, thank you for sharing about that. And I want to ask you too, one more thing. If there's someone listening out here who's been thinking about homeschooling, or maybe they started homeschooling and they're kind of new in their journey, what is one piece of advice that you wish that you would have known when you started?
When I started, and I may have actually said this earlier, homeschool is only as stressful as we make it, as in the parents. If we put too much pressure on ourselves and on our kids, it's going to be a lot harder. If we go into it learning about, like we talked about, deschooling, like make that a first priority, to learn about deschooling and learn that we don't have to be in control and be directing everything, it makes things so much easier.
I agree 100%. I wish I could shout that from the rooftops, that, and it really is. It's such a profound statement that homeschooling is only as stressful as we, the parents, make it. And you're 100% correct, because we really do. We set the pace and the tone and the emotions around what that homeschooling experience is going to be like for our kids. I always tell parents, if your child is miserable, or if you are miserable, you're doing it wrong.
You need to change something up.
Yeah. We got to change something, because learning can and should be fun, and we should be able to have a blast with our kids every day. And just like the person gave that advice to at the beginning, if we can focus on having loving, connected relationships with our kids, the content will sort itself out. But our main focus can and should be simply that, loving and enjoying and supporting our children for who they are, and not worrying about the details. The other stuff, all that other stuff works itself out. I promise it does.
Exactly. Yeah. And it was just, even just whenever they had the shutdown, when they started changing to like online or distance learning is what it was called. I mean, I had people reach out to me like, Shanna, I don't know how you do this homeschooling thing. This is miserable. And I just kind of stood back and I'm like, what you're doing is not homeschooling. I promise you that. Like, please don't make that comparison, because that's not what you're doing. And I felt so bad for them, because they're thrown into this new environment, and it was stressing everybody out. Yeah. And so, it just, real homeschooling does not have to be stressful. And in all honesty, you hear parents say all the time, how, oh my God, they can't wait for school to start back, so they can get rid of their kids. And
it's so honestly, sad.
It is. It's really sad, because I love being around my kids. I don't always love it when they're bickering and fighting at each other, because that's what kids do. But like, I love that they are, they're learning so naturally, and they're growing. And I love seeing that. Like, that's just, it's just amazing to watch how their little minds are developing, and how, like, especially my daughter being 13, how she's just maturing so naturally, and she doesn't have all these outside influences that are pushed on her when, being in like a public school system where she has to feel like she has to compete with society. She can just be her and enjoy her interests, and without the comparisons. So
That's beautiful. Well, thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
And if there's someone that's listening and is hearing your story and they're like, man, I really want to connect with her, how can my listeners get connected with you and the work that you're doing?
Well, I'm on Facebook, Shanna Rathbone, just on Facebook. And I also have an email, just Rathbone818 at Hotmail. It's RATHBONE 818 at Hotmail. But I mean, I have my website, but that's more for my health coaching stuff. But
can you tell us a little bit about that too, just in case someone might be interested in hearing about the natural health work that you do?
Yeah. So part of my journey started because I was debilitated with 7 autoimmune diseases after I got out of the military, and by the time Bella started school, I was completely miserable, and I got tired of feeling like I was guinea pig. I mean, I was on 13 different daily medications, and I wasn't getting any better. I was getting worse. So my husband had finally convinced me to go back and ask for help through the VA, and I went back and asked for help, and they kind of, I don't want to say they shamed me, but the guy kind of jumped over his table, like laid over his desk and was like, why didn't you come any sooner? Because I'd waited so long. It had already been like, I don't know, 12 years since I got out of the military.
Oh, wow.
And because he saw right there in my record that I should have been getting help years before this.
Yeah.
And so they ended up granting me 90% disability. So they granted me a little bit of back pay, but I never wanted to be this disabled person. Like, I wanted to be able to play with my children and everything. So I used some of that money and I went back to school for integrative nutrition because I thought, okay, well, doctors aren't helping me. I'm going to learn how to help myself. So I learned more about the body and stress and toxins and stuff like that. And I was able to reverse all 7 of those autoimmune diseases and started health coaching, but it turned into more of a passion where I wanted to learn more about natural medicine. So I went back to school for naturopathic medicine. And just, I wanted to be able to have the knowledge base to be able to help other people if they also wanted to learn how to treat their health more naturally. And so that was kind of what, I want to say that's kind of what pushed me into the way I homeschool, because since I wanted to treat my health and everything as natural as possible, and I saw that worked in doing things as natural as possible, I kind of thought, well, maybe the learning needs to be the same way, that the natural aspect of learning, the natural flow of interest in how you take in information. So they kind of blended together. So I just,
that's beautiful.
Yeah.
I never thought about that before. Like, taking that natural approach to healing, healing our body, but then also looking at the natural lens when it comes to learning and education. I mean, that's brilliant.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it really kind of goes back to the whole, the way they used to learn, it's kind of like the Montessori style, how you have like older kids teaching younger kids, and there's a natural progression of how kids they learn through doing, and they learn from other people. Right. That's kind of how homeschooling is. I mean, even at co-op, you have older kids teaching younger kids things, and they respond very well to it. So, and the older kid gets that feeling of pride of, oh, I taught them how to do that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I like to do things as natural as I can in pretty much every aspect. Yeah.
Me too. Actually, that's one of the reasons why I wrote my first book was gospel-based parenting, but the other ones that I wrote were called the Crunchy Kids series, because I really felt like, there is this need for a return to natural health and healing and natural wellness. And there really is power in the things that God has made to heal and restore our body. And
yeah.
And it is. And I think that being able to have access to children's books that can communicate a lot of that natural healing and wellness and that natural knowledge is so important to be able to pass that along to our kids. So if you're interested in that series, I'll make sure that I include the links to those books as well. The first one that I wrote is called There's an Oil Just for Me, which is a book I wrote about essential oils. And that was kind of my introduction to the natural world. I was totally skeptical. I was like, okay, essential oils, like, it just seemed kind of kooky to me, but I mean, I tried it when I had my first headache, and smelling some peppermint and literally having a headache disappear within minutes of smelling peppermint. And I was like, this is amazing.
Yeah.
It's really remarkable.
Ironically, that's a lot of people's entry into natural health. It was mine too. Even before I started in on the nutrition aspect, I was looking at it for relief for sleep, because when I was dealing with the autoimmune diseases, my sleep was absolutely horrendous. So my girlfriend was sharing about these essential oils and how lavender helps to calm and helps you sleep and all these different things. And then, then that kind of turned into me using some of them to make my own cleaning products, as I was trying to, get the toxins out of my cleaning products. And it just kind of evolved. It was a process. It didn't happen overnight. So, I always tell people, when they're wanting to, do things more naturally, take baby steps. Don't put too much pressure on yourself and expect that you're just going to turn everything over in your house overnight and you're going to, heal your body in 6 months. Like the same thing with the deschooling. Like, depending on how long your health has been struggling, there's a certain amount of time that's going to take to get things back on track once you start doing things more naturally.
Yeah.
So it's a process, but just as with homeschooling, like, as long as you're committed to the fact that in your heart that what you're doing is in your best interest, or as with homeschooling, your child's best interest, like you'll get there.
That's wonderful advice. Thank you so much for sharing that. So again, I'm going to make sure that I include all those links that we talked about today. There are so many resources, awesome resources that we both have shared for you guys. So make sure that you check out the links in the description. And I just want to thank you so much, one, for being a guest, and then also to those of you listening. Thank you for listening to the Peaceful Worldschooling podcast today. I truly hope that this episode was as much of a blessing for you as it was for me. There are new episodes of the Peaceful Worldschooling podcast that are released every single Tuesday. So make sure that you like and subscribe so that you will not miss out on a single one. If you would like to support me in the work that I'm doing, please share this episode with your friends and family, and then also consider checking out some of the links in the description so that you can get connected with me as well. Or you can visit me on my website, www.peacefulworldschoolers.com. Thank you so much. I hope that your day is as wonderful as you are, and I will see you next Tuesday. Bye.
Bye.
Join us next Tuesday on the Peaceful Worldschooling podcast. I'm your host, ajharders, and if you enjoyed today's episode, click subscribe and be sure to hit the bell so you will not miss out on a single episode.